You will hear a number of different recordings, and you will have to answer questions on what you hear. There will be time for you to read the instructions and questions, and you will have a chance to check your work. All the recordings will be played once only. The test is in 4 parts. At the end of the test, you will be given 10 minutes to transfer your answers to an answer sheet. Now turn to Part 1. Part 1.
Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 5.
Hello?
Oh, hello. I'm ringing about the advertisement in yesterday's newspaper, the one for the bookcases. Can you tell me if they're still available?
We've sold one, but we still have 2 available.
Right. Can you tell me a bit about them?
Sure. What do you want to know?
Well, I'm looking for something to fit in my study. Well, I'm not too worried about the height, but the width's quite important. Can you tell me how wide each of them is?
They're both exactly the same size. Let me see, I've got the details written down somewhere. Yes, so they're both 75 centimetres wide and 180 centimetres high.
Okay, fine. That should fit in okay. And I don't want anything that looks too severe. Not made of metal, for example. I was really looking for something made of wood.
That's all right. They are, both of them.
So, are they both the same price as well?
No, the first bookcase is quite a bit cheaper. It's just £15. We paid £60 for it just 5 years ago, so it's very good value. It's in perfectly good condition. Well, they're both in very good condition, in fact. But the first one isn't the same quality as the other one. It's a good, sturdy bookcase. It used to be in my son's room, but it could do with a fresh coat of paint.
Oh, it's painted?
Yes, it's cream at present. But as I say, you could easily change that if you wanted, to fit in with your colour scheme.
Yes, I'd probably paint it white if I got it. Let's see, what else? How many shelves has it got?
6. 2 of them are fixed, and the other 4 are adjustable, so you can shift them up and down according to the sizes of your books.
Right, fine. Well, that certainly sounds like a possibility.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 6 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 6 to 10.
But the second one's a lovely bookcase too. That's not painted, it's just the natural wood colour, dark brown. It was my grandmother's, and I think she bought it sometime in the 1930s, so I'd say it must be getting on for 80 years old, so it's very good quality. They don't make them like that nowadays.
And you said it's the same dimensions as the first one?
Yes, and it's got the 6 shelves, but it also has a cupboard at the bottom that's really useful for keeping odds and ends in.
Right.
Oh, and I nearly forgot to say, the other thing about it is it's got glass doors, so the books are all kept out of the dust. So it's really good value for the money. I'm really sorry to be selling it, but we just don't have the room for it.
So what are you asking for that one?
£95. It's quite a bit more, but it's a lovely piece of furniture. A real heirloom.
Yes. All the same, it's a lot more than I wanted to pay. I didn't really want to go above 30 or 40. Anyway, the first one sounds fine for what I need.
Just as you like.
So, is it all right if I come round and have a look this evening? Then, if it's okay, I can take it away with me.
Of course. So you'll be coming by car, will you?
I've got a friend with a van, so I'll get him to bring me round. If you can just give me the details of where you live.
Sure. I'm Mrs. Blake.
Blake.
That's right. And the address is 41 Oak Rise. That's in Stanton.
Okay, so I'll be coming from the town centre. Can you give me an idea of where you are?
Yes. You know the road that goes out towards the university?
Yes.
Well, you take that road and you go on till you get to a roundabout. Go straight on, then Oak Rise is the first road to the right.
Out towards the university, past the roundabout, first left.
First right. And we're at the end of the road.
Got it. So I'll be round at about 7, if that's all right. Oh, and my name's Connor. Connor Field.
Fine. I'll see you then, Connor. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
That is the end of part 1.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
You will hear a talk on New Zealand radio about an art sale which is being held to raise money for charity. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 13. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 13.
One of the most anticipated art events in Christchurch is the charity art sale organised this year by Neil Curtis. Neil, tell us all about it.
Well, Diane, this looks like being the biggest art sale yet. And the best thing about it is that the money raised will all go to charity. So what you probably want to know first is where it is. Well, the pictures will be on view all this week, most of them at the Star Gallery in the shopping mall. But we have so many pictures this year that we're also showing some in the cafe next door. So do drop in and see them any day between 9 and 5. Now, if you're interested in buying rather than just looking, and we hope a lot of you will be, the actual sale will take place on Thursday evening, with sales starting at 7:30. Refreshments will be available before the sale, starting at 6:30. We've got about 50 works by local artists showing a huge range of styles and media, and in a minute I'll tell you about some of them. You're probably also interested in what's going to happen to your money once you've handed it over. Well, all proceeds will go to support children who are disabled, both here in New Zealand and also in other countries. So you can find an original painting, support local talent, and help these children all at the same time.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 14 to 20 on page 11. Now listen and answer questions 14 to 20.
Now, let me tell you a bit about some of the artists who have kindly agreed to donate their pictures to the charity art sale. One of them is Don Studley, who has a special interest in the art sale because his 5-year-old daughter was born with a serious back problem. After an operation earlier this year, she's now doing fine, but Don says he wants to offer something to help other less fortunate children. Don is totally self-taught and says he's passionate about painting. His paintings depict some of our New Zealand birds in their natural habitats. One relative newcomer to New Zealand is James Chang, who came here from Taiwan 9 years ago at the age of 56. Mr. Chang had 13 exhibitions in Taiwan before he came to live here in Christchurch, so he's a well-established artist, and art has been a lifelong passion for him. His paintings are certainly worth looking at. If you like abstract pictures with strong colour schemes, you'll love them. Natalie Stevens was born in New Zealand, but has exhibited in China, Australia and Spain. As well as being an artist, she's a website designer. She believes art should be universal, and her paintings use soft colours and a mixture of media. Most of her pictures are portraits, so watch out, some of them may even be friends of yours. And then we have Christine Shin from Korea. Christine only started to learn English 2 years ago when she arrived in New Zealand, but she's been painting professionally for over 10 years, and she sure knows how to communicate strong messages through the universal language of art. She usually works from photographs and paints delicate watercolours, which combine traditional Asian influences with New Zealand landscapes, giving a very special view of our local scenery. Well, that's all I have time to tell you now, but as well as these 4, there are many other artists whose work will be on sale, so do come along on Thursday. We accept cheques, credit cards or cash. And remember, even if you don't buy a picture, you can always make a donation.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
In this section, you will hear a discussion between 2 students, Rosie and Mike, and a university tutor. In the first part of the discussion, they're talking about a survey they have conducted on local entertainment. First, look at questions 21 to 26. Now listen to the first part of the discussion and answer questions 21 to 26.
Good morning, everyone. Well, I think we can start straight away by getting Rosie and Mike to do their presentation. Would you like to start, Rosie?
Yes. Well, we've done a survey on local entertainment. Basically, we tried to find out how students feel about the entertainment in the town and how much they use it.
Yes, so we've called our project Out and About.
Yes, that's a good title, Out and About.
We wanted to find out how well students use the entertainment facilities in town, whether they get to see the latest plays, films, that kind of thing.
Now, we have our own facilities on campus, of course.
Oh, yes. We deliberately omitted those as we really wanted to examine outside entertainment in the town as opposed to on the university campus.
Actually, there were a lot of areas to choose from, but in the end, we limited ourselves to looking at 3 general categories: cinema, theatre and music.
Right.
OK, well, first of all, cinema. In the town, there are 3 main places where you can see films. There's the new multi-screen cinema complex, the old park cinema and a late-night Odeon.
So, if you look at this chart, in terms of audience size, the multi-screen complex accounts for 75% of all cinema seats. The park cinema accounts for 20% of seats, and the late-night Odeon has just 5% of seats.
As you probably know, the complex and the park show all the latest films, while the late-night cinema tends to show cult films. So, when we interviewed the students, we thought the complex would be the most popular choice of cinema. But surprisingly, it was the late-night Odeon.
Yeah, and most students said that if they wanted to see a new film, they waited for it to show at the park, because the complex is more expensive and further out of town, so you have to pay more to get there as well.
Yes, and that adds to the cost, of course, and detracts from the popularity, evidently.
Well, next, we looked at theatres. The results here were interesting because, as you know, there's a theatre on campus which is popular, but there's also the Stage Theatre in town, which is very old and architecturally quite beautiful. And there's the large modern theatre, the Ashtop, that has recently been built.
So you just looked at the two theatres in town?
Yes, but the thing about the theatres is that there's a whole variety of seat prices. Also, the types of performance vary, so students tend to buy seats at both and like using both for different reasons. And if they want cheap seats at the Ashtop, they can just sit further from the front.
What we did find that was very interesting is that there are periods during the year when students seem to go to the theatre and periods when they go to the cinema. And we really think that's to do with budget. If you look at this graph, you can see that there's a peak around November, December when they go to the theatre more, and then a period in April, May when neither is particularly popular. And then theatre viewing seems to trail off virtually, while the cinema becomes quite popular in June, July.
I think you're probably right about your conclusions.
In the second part of the discussion, Rosie and Mike talk about different music clubs. Look at questions 27 to 30 first. As you listen to the discussion, complete the chart about the different music clubs. Listen carefully and answer questions 27 to 30.
Well, lastly, we looked at music, and this time we were really investigating the sort of small music clubs that offer things like folk or specialise in local bands.
So not musicals as such?
That's right.
We looked at 3 small music venues and we examined the quality of the entertainment and the venue and gave a ranking for these. A cross, meaning that the quality was poor, a tick, meaning it was okay, and 2 ticks for excellent. First of all, the Blues Club, which obviously specialises in blues music. This was a pretty small place and the seating was minimal, so we didn't give that a very good rating.
No, we don't recommend that one, really.
Then the Sansu, which plays a lot of South American music. It was a big place, very lively, good performers, so 2 ticks for that one. The Pier Hotel is a folk venue, a good place for local and up-and-coming folk artists to play. Not the best of venues, as it's in a basement and a bit dark, but the quality of the entertainment was reasonable and the lighting was very warm, so we felt it deserved an average rating. Now finally, there's the Bald Rock Cafe, which features big rock bands and is pretty popular with students, and we enjoyed ourselves there as well, so top marks for that one.
And then, did you get any information from the students as to which of the clubs they preferred?
That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers. you will hear a lecturer talking about dust storms. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 36. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 36.
In the last lecture, we looked at the adverse effects of desert dust on global climate. Today, we're going to examine more closely what causes dust storms and what other effects they can have. As you know, dust storms have always been a feature of desert climates, but what we want to focus on today is the extent to which human activity is causing them. And it's this trend that I want to look at, because it has wide-ranging implications. So, what are these human activities? Well, there are two main types that affect the wind erosion process, and thus the frequency of dust storms. There are activities that break up naturally wind-resistant surfaces, such as off-road vehicle use and construction. And there are those that remove protective vegetation cover from soils, for example, mainly farming and drainage. In many cases, the two effects occur simultaneously, which adds to the problem. Let's look at some real examples and see what I'm talking about. Perhaps the best-known example of agricultural impact on desert dust is the creation of the USA's Dust Bowl in the 1930s. The dramatic rise in the number of dust storms during the latter part of that decade was the result of farmers mismanaging their land. In fact, choking dust storms became so commonplace that the decade became known as the Dirty 30s. Researchers observed a similar but more prolonged increase in dustiness in West Africa between the 1960s and the 1980s, when the frequency of the storms rose to 80 a year, and the dust was so thick that visibility was reduced to 1,000 meters. This was a hazard to pilots and road users. In places like Arizona, the most dangerous dust clouds are those generated by dry thunderstorms. Here, this type of storm is so common that the problem inspired officials to develop an alert system to warn people of oncoming thunderstorms. When this dust is deposited, it causes all sorts of problems for machine operators. It can penetrate the smallest nooks and crannies and play havoc with the way things operate, because most of the dust is made up of quartz, which is very hard. Another example. The concentration of dust originating from the Sahara has risen steadily since the mid-1960s. This increase in wind erosion has coincided with a prolonged drought, which has gripped the Sahara's southern fringe. Drought is commonly associated with an increase in dust-raising activity, but it's actually caused by low rainfall, which results in vegetation dying off.
In the second part, the speaker talks about the drying up of the Aral Sea. Look at questions 37 to 40.
One of the foremost examples of modern human-induced environmental degradation is the drying up of the Aral Sea in Central Asia. Its ecological demise dates from the 1950s, when intensive irrigation began in the then Central Asian republics of the USSR. This produced a dramatic decline in the volume of water entering the sea from its two major tributaries. In 1960, the Aral Sea was the fourth largest lake in the world, but since that time it has lost 2/3 of its volume. Its surface area has halved, and its water level has dropped by more than 216 meters. A knock-on effect of this ecological disaster has been the release of significant new sources of wind-blown material as the water level has dropped. And the problems don't stop there. The salinity of the lake has increased, so that it is now virtually the same as seawater. This means that the material that is blown from the dry bed of the Aral Sea is highly saline. Scientists believe it is adversely affecting crops around the sea because salts are toxic to plants. This shows that dust storms have numerous consequences beyond their effects on climate, both for the workings of environmental systems and for people living in drylands.
That is the end of Part 4. You now have 1 minute to check your answers to Part 4. That is the end of the listening test. In the Ielts test, you would now have 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the answer sheet.